Morning, everyone, and welcome to today's class. So today we'll be looking at server-side rendering with Next.js. I'm sure this should be like exciting stuff for you guys. So let's see how server-side rendering works. So for this purpose, we are going to create a new Next.js application, right? And we are going to utilize the page-based routing. But before we move into that, let's look at server-side rendering. So what is server-side rendering? So server-side rendering is a technique used in web development where a web page is rendered on the server rather than on the browser. Right, so simply means that the server generates the complete HTML for the page and sends it to the client, right? Allowing the page to display immediately without the need for additional client-side rendering. Does that make sense? So I'm sure you guys will be wondering why use server-side rendering when what we have is working already, right? And seems quite efficient already, right? But the server-side rendering has its benefits, right? Like improved performance, SEO benefits, yeah, and yeah, some other benefits of. So let's look at some of the benefits. So let's talk about improved performance. So initial page load times are faster because the HTML is already rendered when it reaches the browser. So the rendering has already been done before it even loads on the browser. So it's just delivering the page on first load and it's faster, right? The browser can display the page content immediately without waiting for JavaScript to fetch and render data, right? So for SEO benefits, search engines can crawl and index the fully rendered HTML, improving the site's search engine optimization, right? So I'm sure you guys are conversant with SEO and the advantages of having a good SEO, right? So yeah, exactly. So it helps with SEO too. So particularly important for content-heavy websites or web applications that rely on good search engine visibility, right? Then it also improves user experience. So for user experience, see content faster, right? Leading to a perceived performance boost, right? Reduces the likelihood of users seeing a blank page or loading spinner while waiting for the content to load, right? But well, I wouldn't really say loading spinner is bad. It's not bad because it's actually also user friendly to have the user know that there's a load happening. But ideally, um what server-side rendering does, it's fast. So because it is fast, it now removes the whole need for the loading, right? It's like that loading is reduced to almost 0 seconds, right? So with that, it's not really necessary to handle the loading and having a spinner when everything is loading at first mount, right? So how does it work in Next.js? How does server-side rendering work? Are we together? Can I go on? So Next.js already provides built-in, yeah. So Next.js provides built-in support for server-side rendering, right? So it handles the request. So for request handling, when a user requests the page, the server handles the request and generates the HTML for that page on the server, right? For data fetching, NextJs allows you to fetch data on the server side before rendering the page. So it fetches the data first before rendering the page. So everything is rendered together, right? That's why when I spoke a little bit earlier, talked about the loading state, right? So for the fact that is making the API call or fetching the data before even rendering, right? It's like a performance advantage for SSR, right? So you can use functions like get server-side props to fetch data and pass it as props to your components. For rendering page, the server renders the React components into HTML, including the fetch data. The server sends the fully rendered HTML to the client's browser, right? Now there's something called hydration, right? So for hydration, once the HTML is loaded in the browser, React takes over and hydrates the page, attaching event listeners to the HTML elements and making the page interactive. So the fact that this hydration is helps for hydration, where basically hydration is just a method of loading things based on importance, right? So it also helps. SSR helps with hydration. This step involves reconciling the static HTML with the React components to ensure everything works as a dynamic React application. So do we understand everything I said? Or not too fast? Okay, so we can move then. All right, we can move. Yeah, you can always read more, right? So I think, yeah, you can always read more, read about the concepts that are involved, right? And what's really happening, especially for hydration. Maybe hydration is not a topic that we can cover in this class. So maybe you can explore hydration on your own, right? Maybe if we are lucky, we can have another class, or maybe we can have another class where we talk about hydration. All right. So let's move on to actual work. All right. Okay, so first we're going to create our new next application. So let's call this second next. Okay. Then yeah, we're not using TypeScript. No. I like to use yes, int yes, tailwind yes, and no. Base routing. No. Okay. All right, so let's give it a minute or so for it to install. All right, so Daniel, you said the idea makes sense, right? So let's hear from you now.
Hello, good morning, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So
Okay.
the question is, yeah, let me give you a question. The question
Why
will be,
I say so was that from the explanation that you are giving us and listing the advantages of SSR,
mhm,
it makes sense to me, and the SEO, the SEO part and the fastness of the whole thing. Although I know that I'll still go back and read more on the whole concept, but from what you've been explaining, it's a nice one. Thank you.
okay, okay. So so what do you think is something that you would prefer over client-side loading? Is this something you think you benefit from?
I believe the both of them have their advantage or disadvantage.
Mhm.
Maybe, but I believe depending on the project I'm working on, you should be able to tell me if I should use CSR or SSR.
Okay. All right. Okay. I just want to pick your brain while we waited for our server to our application to install. All right, so we have our next app installed. Now, if you notice here, you see that the structure of this very application we just created now is different from what we had in the last application when we did the app-based routing, right? We are doing the page-based routing now. So let me uh let me open. Okay, so let me show you in what I'm talking about. So as you can see, we have SRC, we have app, right? And then within the app is where we are now defining um our routes and all other components, right? Where the whole work we are doing, apart from our store, is located within the app, right? I hope you guys are following. Are you guys following? All right. But in this case now, you see that we are using page-based routing, right? So for page-based routing, you see that everything is located within the page. And you can see that it already creates an API route for me here, right? On default. Okay, so let's go ahead and just implement start work so that we don't have that much time anymore. So, all right, so let's just go ahead and kick off. The first thing I'm going to empty this. um, All right, so let's go ahead and create our API routes first. Then we can now work on our index, right? So first step would be is to create a folder called users. And then within this folder, we want to have an index file, an index.js file, because this method of routing, it is the index that will be recognized, right, by our application. So when trying to find, when trying to access the route, our API route, the application is going to be looking for this index. It's going to recognize the index, right? And then for calling for checking individual users based on their IDs, we can now have ID.js. Are we together? Are we together? So I'm going to create a component outside of pages for our data. So I want to create a folder called data. And within this folder, I'll have a file named users.js. So I'm going to define my user array here. Okay. ID name. All right. Okay. So we can work with this. So I'll export some models. Export const get user. And function and users. All right. Then I want to define another export. Const get user by ID. All right. Okay, I want to use parse int. Okay. So we have our get users, we have get user by ID, and then we want to have export const add user. But for add user, I want to say const new user. User, and want to give it a user ID. User.length. So I'm sure you understand. You guys understand what I'm doing. Users push user, then return. Are you following? Are you guys following me? Can I continue? Are we good? All right. Okay. Then we now want to handle delete, right? Let's handle update. Update user by ID. Okay. So const index equals to user find index user. Okay. Okay. Okay, it works. This works. All right. All right, then we can handle export const delete user by ID. Const index something. And if index displays deleted user. User index. Okay, are we together? All right, so I'm just trying to see how we can be like fast, right? All right, so we have our delete function and we defined our index, and then we are checking that index, and if it fulfills the condition, we now handle our delete by splicing the user's array and removing that very index and returning the deleted user array, right? The new array, rather. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our API routes. So we created our index file, right? And for this index file, we want to have our get and post request because we want to display this on the first page. We want to utilize this API on the first page of our application. So we're going to import our get users from data and also import our add users. Okay. All right. Then we now export default async function, right? Then this will be a handler. Define our request and response. Okay, so we have our handler defined. Now we can so I'm going to utilize a switch statement to handle this route, right? So I'll say request dot method. And for first case, get. And for get, we want to have const users equals to get user. Then once we get that, we want to convert. So if the response, the status is 200, we want to convert the users to a JSON file. Then we break. Then we can have a second case. And for this case, it's post. So for post, we want to have const. We want to add name and email. If you get lost, just raise your hand up and I can always touch base or come back to give clarity, okay? So request dot body or if name or email where's the status 400 JSON. Then I want to say error. And then the error message will be name and email are required. As you can see, yeah, I'm doing some level of validation here, right? So this is like backend validation. Are you following? Or can return? Okay. Then we want to have const new user equals to add user name. Okay. So yeah, for this now we want to have response of 200, right? Let's use 201. So then we break. Then on default, we want to have res dot set header allow get and post. And res status 45, yeah, we use 45. Then we want to have backtick. Dollar requests. Where's that method? Okay. So basically what we just did now is we just created a backend route for getting the users and creating user. Are we good? I'm sure you guys you've done this already now. Yeah, question, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
No, good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning.
The way you are doing this API route is different from the way you did it in the last class. Or is it me that is not remembering well? I don't remember you using handler before. I remember using next request and next response because that's what I used.
Mm-hmm. But if you remember, this is the backend route, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I think it will benefit you more if you are more focused on learning based on what I'm teaching. You see that what I did last time, I'm doing something different this time. It's
Yes.
your own advantage now.
Yes.
I don't see different methods of doing the same thing.
True.
I think so.
Yes.
Exactly. So this is just another method of handling
The
this
backend
thing.
route.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if you remember, the last time we were actually calling APIs from a particular JSON placeholder,
Yes,
right?
sir.
Exactly. But now we are creating our own API, right?
Yes, sir.
Exactly. So um, it will be more beneficial if you adapt to the different, you see a new method and you can adapt to it, right? Because we are now flying high, right? So for every step of the way, I'm trying to introduce you guys to something else, a new concept, so that at least when you find yourself in different scenarios, you can always adapt and be creative in your mind. Yeah. So as you can see, normally creating this API route, it's very possible to create all these handlers separately, right? Without using a
Yes.
switch case. And you can create them into different models, right? And you can still export all of them. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
But in this case now, I'm using a switch statement to handle it. Sure you get. So it's like opening your eyes to other concepts or methods of doing the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right, you're welcome. Faith, do you have a question?
Yes, good morning, sir.
Okay.
You can hear me, right?
Really? Good morning.
Okay. My question is, first off, I'm seeing this pages folder, and I'm guessing like when I see a code base where I'm seeing pages folder, does that mean that is SSR? And unlike when I see app, and then does that mean that's CSR?
Okay. Well, that's a good question because I think it would be right to think that way. Yeah, to be right to think that way, even though there are different methods of handling SSR, and we are just handling one method, and this is the method I am conversant with, right? So I wouldn't outrightly say that you can define a code base or decide or just know that it's SSR based on the structure of the folder or the folder structure or the method of routing that they are using, right? So it's very possible that they can also utilize SSR when they can use SSR when handling the routing based on the app, right? But for the purpose of this class, right, and based on my own, how do I put it, based on my own proficiency, we are going to be working with the pages, right? So if you want to know if a code base is utilizing SSR, there are other ways you can find out. You don't necessarily have to base it off the structure of the code base. you can find out with the actual implementations of the code, right? Of which we are heading towards there. So you get to see how SSR is working and why it is even SSR in the first place. Does that make sense? Are you good?
Yeah,
All right.
and I want to ask another question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So of course, NextJS have two methods of routing, right? And this method you are using, this is the page. There's the app, and I'm just wondering, maybe because for me now, what I'm getting from this is that okay, it's because you are using page routing system. That's why you're using all of this and the was that now, like that's your name for like request and response, because those things by default now they have their own function that come with it. Like for example, I'm saying dot set headers and stuff like that, but I'm now saying I don't think all of this thing might work if we were using that app routing, right?
Okay. So is that like your thoughts or is it a question? Because you are entitled to your own thoughts, right? Until you test it out. So now you have seen the application of this thing. Now I am actually implementing it, and this video will be available, right? So it's left to you to go ahead and explore the possibilities of it working in the app-based routing system. Do you understand?
Yes.
You understand, right? Exactly. So, like I always tell you guys, learning does not stop in the class. Do you get? And I like the fact that most of you are very inquisitive. You guys have very inquisitive mind. So explore, feel free to explore different methods. Like I said, there is always is to your advantage if you know how to utilize things differently, right? So explore this very one. Let it be a task for you guys to explore. Okay. Hello, Faith. Are you good?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Who else?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have another question? Henry. Henry, are you good? Daniel, are you good? Okay. Are you guys lost? All right. Thank you. Where do you see that? What line is that? All right. All right. Okay. All right. Let's go on now. Let's go ahead and utilize these routes. So when we come back to our index file, right? Okay, so hold on, guys. Okay, so for us to utilize this route, right, let us go ahead and implement other high-level components of this application before we come back to create our index, right? So the next step we'll take is to create our store. Are we together? So we create our store. Now, within the store, we want to have first, we want to have Axios instance, JS. Okay. All right, so we now have Axios instance. We also want to have middleware. No, let's not use middleware. Let's create a store.js, and then we create our user slice. Users slice.js. Okay, so let's install. So let's install without okay. Okay, so as you can see, app layout page, initial steps. Okay, yeah, thank you, Faith. All right, so let's go ahead and do what we need to do. So I think we also need to install Axios. Okay. All right, we can now go ahead and continue with our work. All right, so first things first, we want to create our Axios. What Axios? Axios. Honest. Axios instance. So we have Axios dot create base URL. So we don't need PR token. So we have a base URL, we'll call it /API, because that's the folder where we are targeting, right? So we use /API, then default export. Export default. Axios instance. Okay, so we have our Axios instance done. So let's create our user slice. So for user slice, ideally we want to get create slice, create slice from Windows toolkit. And then we want to have our create async tonk. All right, then we keep going. We import our Azure instance. All right, then we can now make our get requests. So we say export const fetch user. All right, and then we say create async tonk. And for this, the action will be users. The action will be users / fetch users. Sync. Okay. Now const response equals to await, and we want to utilize our Axios instance dot get and the route. Okay, so now this route that we have here, as you can see, this route is users. So this API, our Azure instance is pointing us to API, right? And then we are picking the user folder in API, which is this, which we will now recognize this index as the actual API route. Are we following? Are we following? So after making that API call, we can now return Give me a second, guys. So we can now return our response.data. So now that we have response.data returned, we can now go ahead and create this slice. So come down here and say const user slice equals to create slice. Then we name it users. Then initial states. So for initial state, we want to have users so that when we get user, we want to update this very state with the user information. Then we want to, let's say maybe we don't have this yet, so let's leave it. So let's say status of idle and error. No, okay. So with this now, we can now create our reducers. So for our users, I'm going to leave it as an empty object. Then we have our extra reducers. Define the builder. Okay. So builder. Let's see. So we fetch and we have our pending states. Okay. Update this to loading. Then we have our succeeded, and then we update the user table, the user array. Then we fetch, we update the field and update the error. Okay. So with this, we can now export. We can now export our default user slice reducer. Okay. Then we want to also have the data. So we say export const get user data. We're taking it from the states. And our function states that user. Okay. Okay, I think we're good. So for this scenario now, for this case now, we are done with the API call, creating our slice to handle this API call. So let's just go ahead and handle the create. Let's handle the create so that we can just implement. So export const create user equals to async create async trunk. And for this, we have user slash create user. Okay. And async. So passing the user function. Okay, so const response equals to await Axios instance route is user and then passing the user. Okay. All right, so we're good. So with this now we can now set up our extra reducer for creating a user, right? So we can just copy this and replace it here. Get users. Get user, and then we can call this. Okay, then we want to update this. And for this, I want to say state.user.push action period. Error is the same. Okay. Are we good? Are we together? Can we go on? All right, good. So with this now, we should be able to create work with our, okay, we need, oh, my bad. We haven't created our store. So for store, we import configure store, and then we import create wrapper. All right, so we need to install wrapper. Hold on, guys. Okay, so we'll go ahead and install our wrapper. So we'll say npm install next Redux wrapper. Okay, that works. All right, so all right. So we have our wrapper now. So we can now import our users user from. So rain is falling here. So if you can't hear me clearly, just let me know. And in case it disturbs my internet, bear with me. All right, so we have our slice imported. So we can go ahead and say const make store was to function configure store. Then for configure store, we have user. Then we have user. Okay. All right. So we have our, now there's something that you need to, so you can see that I'm using this create wrapper on this to wrap the store. So this create wrapper is something that is utilized when you are looking at utilizing SSR, when you're looking at utilizing server-side rendering with Redux, right? As you can see, it's something that comes with, it's part of Next, and it's like a provision for Redux. So now I'm wrapping this store with this wrapper. Now this wrapper is what's going to handle, is what's going to help handle our server side imports or rendering, if I may call it that. Okay, so now that we have this, we can go ahead and create and work in our app. So ideally we need to implement our provider, right? Because without the provider, we cannot utilize the store, and the application will not be able to access the store. So we need to come here and modify this code. So first thing we'll do is to import wrapper from store. Get server-side props. All right, so wrapper from store, then we can now have our const store props equals to wrapper dot use wrapper. All right, dot use wrapper store, and then we want to pass the page props. Okay. Okay, are you guys following? No. So we can now utilize our provider. So we'll say provider from Redux. Then we want to add our store. Okay. We want to add our store. Then we want to add this here. Thank you. Then it will be props. The page props. Okay. All right. Now let's export default wrapper with Redux. Okay. So do we have any question so far? It's still basic Redux that we've been doing since, just implementing, like utilizing our provider. That's all. Do I need to explain further? Are we good? So that we can move. All right, thank you. Okay. All right, so main next script body. Okay, everything here looks good. We can move. So we come to this part of our code, and then we can now write our index.js. So let's write our HTML div, and then we can say, yeah, h1 is cool. What else thing? Okay, so H1 enter this. Okay, welcome to, let's call a user. Users. Okay, then we want to check status is equals to loading. And p tag, we have our loading. Then we want to check status is failed. Error, then error. We want to check. Then for this scenario, we want to have succeeded. List. So we are going to create a user list component so that we can use that to display our users' information. All right. Okay. Then okay, let's have one more state. Let's have this less is equals to 0. And then we want to display another p tag. For this p tag, we want to say no user found. All right. Now, as you can see, we have a lot of deprecating code, right? So let's have the HTML set up. We are going to fix all the deprecations. Create users. And then we're also going to create a user form component. All right. I believe we are good so far. Let's just speed up. Let me see how let's speed up a little. So the first thing I want to dispatch, but in this case, since we are utilizing server-side rendering, I'm going to do first to const get my user information from the Redux store, status, then error, right? And we use selector from Redux. And then we want to get user data. All right. So with this, once an API call is successful, we should be able to visualize our users from this, right? And that means all this should work. And as you can see, all our duplications have now returned back to normal, right? So what's left here is to create our user list and our user form. But before we do that, for consistency, we want to make sure that we always have our code or our fetch API call working. And we want to make sure that that fetch happens just once, except there's a change. Except there's a change in the informations or change in data. So if the status is idle, right, then dispatch. In order to dispatch, let us const dispatch equals to use dispatch redux. So dispatch, and we want to dispatch fetch users. Now we want to, based on the status and dispatch. So we are going to be running this use effect based on the changes in these two dependencies. All right, so let's go ahead and make our actual server-side API call, right? So we come here and we say export const get server side get server side prop. The question wrapper get server side props. All right. Then we want to store sync then we say await for the dispatch. Okay. Then we return props. All right, so this typically, so this should handle our server-side API request, right? And ideally handle our server-side rendering. So I'm not going to function here. It should be just const. Okay. Are we clear? So if I comment this out, yeah, okay. So if I comment these components that have not been built, we should be able to visualize our code. So we have a dispatch issue, value could call, which can only be called inside of the body of function code. Okay, let's debug this. Mm. Mm. Okay, so I'm beginning, and I think this has to do with versioning of this stuff. Mm, okay. Bad request. Okay. Yeah. All right, let's have the components. Let's create this user list. So for that, we're going to create a folder called components. Components. And within that folder, we'll create file name user list.js. Okay. So for user list, we just want to list the user, right? So say import use dispatch. Open export defaults. The list. That comes dispatch. Use dispatch. Okay. I think saw the error. Okay, let's go on. That has been solved. So apparently I did not call this function properly here. Is that clear? All right. So can return say UL and then for non-users map users. Then we have li. Key will be user dot ID. Then one since we are let's just let's use link. So this link is a tag that comes with NextJs, and I'm sure you guys use it already. You can use it for dynamic routing, right? So for this, I'm going to say backticks and users slash so, so, So with this, we should be able to display the users. For this, we don't need this yet. Okay, so let's also create the components for adding a user, right? How many minutes do we have? Okay, we still have time. So we say use user form, JS. So for user form, we are going to import use states. And we can import our use dispatch. And then we import the actions. So create user and fetch users. All right. So export. Am I too fast, guys? Am I too fast? I guess, okay, I guess not. So cons, let's define our form data and set form data. Okay, and use states. And for the form data, we are passing in name, initial states for name empty. And then same thing for email. And the initial states for email is empty too. Then we have our dispatch function. Use dispatch. And we now create our inputs on change handler. For this, want to say const, want to the structure name and value. From targets. The target. Then we want to set form data. Set and do our submits. As to handle submit, we have e.prevent. Try as a const response. customer wait. Dispatch. Create user. Utilizing form data. Then I can alert. That's the user being created. Six. Then we can now clear our form data. Okay. Then we want to fetch again. Then we can now catch our error. Then also that's error. Here. And in that scenario, to try and build to create. So with this now, we can go ahead and just quickly have our form. So I think this works. We have text, name, value from the terminal. Change, we have change to this. That works. Okay. Seem to have an error. So, yeah. Okay. Are we together? Enoch, are you still following? All right. So we have our form. It's not gonna look so nice, but it's going to serve the purpose. All right, so if I create a user now, so apparently it's not displaying our user. it's not being displayed. Let's see why it's not being displayed. So maybe that is there's okay. So I hope you it's there. Where did you see a square bracket? What line? What line? Yeah,
I think line 11. I don't know, Sha. Maybe I'm not seeing it because your screen is somehow blurry from my side, maybe because of network or something. I don't know.
okay. Okay. It's not square. There's no square bracket here.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so we have our users. And if I create a new user now, it should be added. So that's great there. Also be added. Okay, so are we good? So let's add one more functionality before we go. So let's add a button for delete. Say on click. And delete based on user ID. Sponge. ID. Okay, let's go ahead and create the route. So we already have delete user by ID here. So in order to create this route, we'll be utilizing this very route by ID, right? So let's go ahead, import. Let's just import the both of them, get user by ID, and then delete by ID. And say export default sync function. This would be an handler request and a response. And for this, you want to have query ID and method. First, so we'll still maintain our switch, same method. And we have our case get. So the columns user equals gets user by ID, and then first the ID. Let's see if user response dot status from JSON. Response dot status user. Break. I want to handle deletes. Let's delete. I want to say delete. I apply the response. Let's set header. Allow it beautiful. So we'll kind of come down to our user slice. Handle our units API request. We'll say export honest with user was to create a symptom. And for this, we want to say users slash delete user same. Sync and then ID from user. Okay, so const expose a user. Um, hmm, All right, so we're deleting based on the ID, right? So for this now, we can now create our extra reducer. So we don't need to do much. We can just copy and paste, right? So we can copy this, paste it below. This one go delete user. And we can click delete and then place it here. Okay, so for this, I want to say equals to state dot users dot filter the type user some ID. Okay. All right, let's try our code out. Let's see. Let's go to our list and then we want to import this. Let's run this. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and test this out. So if we try to delete, does it work? So delete doesn't work. So where is it? Oh, okay. Mm, okay. So it seems like it doesn't want to delete the already existing data, which is wrong. And we are behind schedule. So we might have to pick up from where we stopped here in our next class. We are 9 minutes beyond time. So we don't have enough time to debug this on the call, so we are going to debug it in our next class. Is that okay? Henry, is that okay? Enoch. Can you guys hear me? All right, okay. All right, so thanks for coming. Yeah, thanks for coming today. It was fun teaching you guys. I look forward to our next class. Bye, guys.